Yeah, we are live.
Wow.
There we go. All right, let me turn off my sound. All right, we're live. There you go. People are going to start joining in. This is great. How are you?
I'm good. I'm a little nervous, but I'm good. Ooh,
That's
look,
okay.
there's people here.
I know. Well, it's funny. That's like I think of like the joy of live television. This isn't television, but it's live, so that's the idea. It's like fun, scary at the same time. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Fun,
But
scary. Yes.
yeah. All right. Well, as people are joining, welcome everybody. My name is Adrian Neibauer, and I'm very, very excited to be joined by Patricia here. We're going to have each other introduce ourselves and talk, a little bit. We've got somewhat of a structure, but really we just want to have a great conversation. Two teachers talking back and forth about the before times and now, and what teaching's was like back then versus now. So,
Yeah.
yeah, we're going to just take a couple minutes just to get people to join, but welcome everybody. This is great. I'm coming from Colorado, by the way. My name's Adrian. And Patricia, you're in California, yes?
Yes, I'm in Oakland, California.
Oakland. Okay,
Mhm.
awesome. Awesome. All right, let me make sure everything's, I think. Yeah, this is good. All right. Well, Patricia, why don't you start by introducing yourself? Tell us who you are, kind of what you do, and yeah, we'll start there.
All right. I am a writer. I taught elementary school. I got my credential in 1990, and I mostly taught third grade. And public education was really different then, which is part of what we're going to be talking about. I taught for a few years, and then I ended up making the sort of radical decision to homeschool with my kids starting in 1997. And that was it was partly because financially for me to have two kids in childcare and be teaching just didn't make a lot of sense. But then I was also interested in it being this sort of grand experiment in progressive education. But I actually had no idea what, having been a teacher and then watching my own kids learn, I had so much more to learn about learning. And that was really the lens where I started to understand, wow, how much independence and agency matter in the learning process.
Right.
So later I was working on an article about the teaching of writing. And this was probably around 2008. And I started to recognize that, oh, wait, there aren't writers' workshops in classrooms the way there used to be. What's going on? And that was when I started to research what the No Child Left Behind Act, which was passed in 2001, how that was already having an effect on classrooms. So I became very interested in that. So now I am writing a book on losses in childhood independence. It's part memoir, part cultural history. And when I tell people I'm writing about how much independence and freedom kids have lost, they always think I'm talking about them not being able to be out in the world, on their bikes and stuff. And that's part of it. But there's the two parts people really don't seem to understand is I think kids have lost a lot of independence and freedom in their daily lives because their days are so much more scheduled than they were. They just the little kids don't have the same amount of time to play. Teenagers don't have the same amount of free time, certainly that I had when I was a teenager. I think that's had a huge effect. And then what I see almost no one talking about is how, as those changes were happening, kids were also losing independence in the classroom. So that's what my book is about. And because people don't talk about changes in independence in the classroom, I'm really excited to talk to you.
Yeah.
And you became a teacher right around the time of the passing of the No Child Left Behind Act. So this will be really fun to talk about.
Yeah. So I mean, that's a great segue. I became a teacher. So No Child Left Behind was 2001.
Mm-hmm.
And I was looking back through my notes, like I became a teacher 2003, 2004 school year when I really just had my own classroom.
Yes.
So I was student teaching 2002, things like that, graduating from college 2001, 2002.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's been quite a change. And, we're going to go through some of these things now, but I'm excited for your book. Do you have a release date yet, or is it too soon to tell?
That would be exciting. I still need to get an agent. I'm revising my book. I'm working through chapters. It's a labor of love, but yes.
I'm very excited. I'm very excited to read it for when it comes out, because you're right. No one talks about like agency is kind of a buzzword in education, at least it is now. And we talk a lot about teacher agency,
Yeah.
and teachers not being able to do what they used to be able to do. Um, a few small, like if there's some small circles in the field talking about student agency, specifically related to equity, diversity, equity, and inclusion. But the idea of just a systemic, broad scale of like we've all lost agency as schools have changed from 2000s to now.
Yeah.
I can't wait. I mean, it's going to be. I'm very interested to hear your experience and also talk to you today because we get to chat a little bit about it today, which is awesome. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Absolutely.
So my name's Adrian Neibauer. If you're unfamiliar, my Substack is Adrian's Newsletter. It's not a flashy title. It's just my newsletter. I write weekly. And then Patricia, you're on Substack here as well. Yes.
Yes, my newsletter is Welcome to the Wonder Farm, and I'm usually posting about once a month. I've been experimenting with posting videos on Substack and other places
Yeah.
on a theme for the month, and then in the newsletter, I'm talking about it because it seems like that's where my readers are. So I'm
Yeah.
trying to
Yeah.
find them where they are.
That's great. That's
Mhm,
awesome. So if you
mhm.
don't subscribe to Patricia's Substack, I highly, highly recommend. If you don't subscribe to mine, I obviously recommend you subscribe to mine as well. But are you ready to jump right in?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. All right. So we were first talking about, when you and I were talking, was just with curriculum specifically. So
Uh-huh.
we talked about like the structural shifts with curriculum. And so the topic that we kind of wanted to start with was prevailing theories and practices from the early 90s to now. Um, what was the in vogue theory, practice, pedagogical practice that was happening while you were in the classroom teaching third grade in the 90s?
So, I mean, to backtrack a little, I got my
Yes.
credential in 1990, and so it was a year and a half long program in
Right.
where I was in California, and it was really in depth. Like we had a class on how to teach reading and writing, another one on how to teach math, another one on how to teach social science. Like we had a lot of instruction, and it was all incredibly child centered. Child like based I was writing down notes like based on the kids being engaged, hands-on learning, cooperative learning, higher level thinking. And so when I got into my classroom, that's how people were actually, I mean, we were allowed to teach that way. There were certainly teachers that weren't using those methods, but it was very in vogue in my district. We got a lot of professional development around it. So, like, I had a writer's workshop in my classroom every day where kids wrote about whatever they wanted to write about. And that was how they were learning their writing skills. In math, we had like, I'd give them big, juicy problems and say, okay, try to figure this out. And then they would talk in groups like, how did you figure it out? How did you figure it out? And then as a class, we would all come together and be like, okay, what are the different methods to figure out this problem? And then the idea was each student should try to figure out what way makes sense to you. How do you want to figure out how to do this math? There were very few like worksheets of lots. Like at the end, I'd give them that where they could practice doing it, but mostly it was a methodology. So
Yeah.
that was not only how I was taught to teach, it was how I was allowed to teach, and I was given so much freedom and support to teach that way.
And there was no standardized testing. Yes. Right. So there
There was
wasn't.
one test a year, and it was a state test. I think it must have been or no, I'm sorry. I think it was the NEEP, national, what is that? They've been giving that
Oh,
test for decades.
um,
It's the one test they've always given. I mean,
right.
since I think the 70s or late
Right.
60s. So it was a test that they would have at the end of the year, but it was very low pressure. Like there was no pressure on me for my students to do well. I would even tell them, I don't want you to worry about this. This is just something we have to do. If you don't understand something, it's okay. I didn't do any like other than teaching them how to bubble in answers. Like I
Right.
didn't do like no time was devoted to teaching what was on the test.
Right. So those are scantrons for those of us who don't know the bubbling, right? Those
Yeah.
are the scantrons.
That's what they
That's
did. They had to bubble it
that's
in. That was the biggest thing. It's like teaching them how to bubble stuff in. That
right.
was all the only
Well,
prep I would do.
I remember being a student and in high school, we took the Iowas, middle school, high school, which I don't know if that's the same thing as a NEET, but it was like the one test. And being super scared that if I didn't erase the bubble enough, if the machine was going to mark that, or if I didn't get exactly in that circle, if I was just outside of it, it was going to mess it up. And
Yeah.
that's really fascinating. So when I started teaching in the early 2000s, so No Child Left Behind was 2001, but right before that, Reggie Routman was like the teacher educator philosopher person that was really leading the way. Like most of my college classes address Reggie Routman's work in some way. If you're not familiar, she had a book that came out in 2000. I think it was called Conversations, how to teach reading and writing and instructional strategies. They were known as like strategies. It wasn't like a child center. It was these different strategies. So by the time I got into my classroom, I had my Reggie Routman stuff with me. And it was right around the time it was called P21, the 21st century framework, because we had to get kids ready for the 21st century. And technology was like right on the heels of Reggie Routman. So this was before we had like individual one-on-one, we still had a computer lab and things like that. But this framework, P21 framework, I think it came out in like 2005, 2006. People were like, we got to get kids ready for technology. So in that interim between when I became a teacher and the wave of technology that hit me, I don't want to say that it was the Wild West, but I had a lot of freedom. Like
Yeah.
my first school, I remember asking like, well, what are we using to teach reading? And they just took me to the library where all the novel sets were. And they said, you can choose any one of these novels.
Yeah.
We've got class sets of, gosh, they must have had ones for every grade level,
Yeah.
Patricia. They had
That was
picture
super
books,
common when I was a teacher too.
kindergarten through fifth grade. They had,
Yes.
and it was great. And the only issue I had was making sure that I don't do a read aloud from a book that the next year's teacher might teach. Does that
Yeah.
make sense?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I,
Yeah.
I taught fourth and fifth grade, so it wasn't even a problem.
Yeah.
Same thing with writing. There was a couple of different things. There was like writer's workshop was a thing. Step up to writing was a thing. There were all these like a la carte options.
Yeah.
The only thing that was kind of standard was our math curriculum.
Uh-huh.
But other than that, people were just like, just teach, use what you want. Here's what I use. I've been using. A lot of teachers were like, this is what I've been using. And they were really big on those things.
Mm.
But like, I kind of was making my way in those first years, just trying to figure out because like, I don't know if I felt really prepared. I don't know if any teacher feels really prepared coming out of college, going into the classroom.
Yeah.
But it was really interesting because it's very, my college experience was very theory heavy.
Mm-hmm.
I did child psychology, Piaget, Vygotsky, Nell Noddings, like all that stuff. But then you get into the classroom and it's not so much about theory, it's practice. And it's hard for teachers to bridge that gap. And like, how do I take this theory that I've been learning and put it into practice? And so that's why I really leaned on people like Reggie Routman, at least early on in the 2000s.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember. I was going to look up when Lucy Calkins came around, but she was
Oh, she
another
was
big
around
one.
when I was a teacher, so
So that's
early
later.
90s. She was already, but her, what
I
she
feel like,
was, it was more like there were books. Like it was
right,
all
right,
like ideas, that it wasn't like, programs.
right.
She wasn't
It
selling
wasn't like a
programs.
program, but
No.
I mean, it was really interesting. So it was starting to get scripted, and then I remember when it became super scripted, and it was around 2010 when we adopted Common Core
Yeah.
standards.
So,
So
you know what? One thing I thought it would be interesting to backtrack, because I think
yeah,
some people don't even quite understand what No Child Left Behind
yes,
actually did. And so, like, I
yeah,
was looking it up to make sure I
no,
understood it, but it was like it mandated federal funding was tied to how well. First of all, the state it wasn't a national test. Each state had to come up with a standardized program and their own test that would show how well students would do, and that the federal funding would be tied to how well they did. And not only did they have to do well, they had to do better every year. So they had to prove adequate yearly
right,
progress.
yep,
So like that, to me, that's crazy. Like, oh yeah, every year the students have to do better and better. Like, that doesn't make any sense, for one thing. But if they weren't doing well after 3 years, it got tied to school closings, teacher firings, and all kinds of stuff. So when you're saying it was kind of the Wild West when you started, that's probably because even though it got passed in 2001, it was several years where the different states were figuring out, how are we going to go about this?
right,
But what most of them did, because the testing companies, of course, were the same as the textbook companies. Like,
yes, yeah,
I mean, Bush started, no, I'll do this real quick. I'll get on my little
No, that's okay.
thing.
That's
But
what we're here
Bush
for.
started No Child Left Behind, and his family had for his grandfather was tied to the McGraws of McGraw Hill. So like there's all kinds of reasons why they wanted the I believe they wanted the testing companies to be part of this act. We're going to bring testing and textbook
Yeah.
into education because we think business people know how to run classrooms better than
Yes.
educational professionals. That was a lot of the thinking at the time. And so it took a while for that to all happen, but once it started happening, they wanted all of the schools to adopt the textbooks that would prepare the kids to do well on this specific test because they wanted their federal funding. So when you're talking about things getting scripted, that's when it started to amp up. Once each different state figured out, okay, this is how we're gonna do this.
I'm so glad you brought that up because I never was really cognizant of money early in my teaching career. Like resources just appeared.
Yeah.
If someone on the team said they needed something, things
Yes.
just showed up. I
Absolutely.
never had to worry about, begging, going on. There wasn't an online really to go and like beg for school supplies or any of that stuff. So it's really interesting. As soon as federal funds got tied to our performance, all of a
Yes.
sudden money became really, really important. And
Yes.
we don't have as much money this year that we had last year
Yeah.
because our scores are low. And
Yeah.
that was like a common rhetoric that was repeated over and over again. And it just got louder and louder and louder as years went on. Do you think it rolled out in different phases depending on the state?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, that's what I've heard, and yeah, because every state was able to do it
Do
in
things a little bit.
yeah.
Well, and California has such a huge school system. I can imagine that maybe they were on the front end, like the leading the
Well,
way
because
with.
we were often adopting the textbooks first, and so then other states would follow what
I
we were
see.
doing. But, we had textbooks when I was a teacher, but we didn't have to use them. Like, I was telling you this, I didn't wanna use the language arts textbook, and so I asked my principal if he could just not order it for me because it was expensive, and I wanted that money to use for real books, and he's like, "Well, I can't do that, but you can." He let me put the textbooks in the broom closet. And then he helped me get a grant because I wanted to get a grant to get books that reflected the diversity of the students in my
Yeah,
classroom. So I got
yeah.
this really great grant and I got to get all these books. So anyway, that was how it was. Like no one was looking over my shoulder to see if I was actually using the textbooks. I didn't have to,
So
but
there was no
we had to buy
child
them.
so there was no child-centered textbook because you were very much part of the child-centered, like but there was no textbook that says, "Here's how you do child-centered."
No, the textbooks I think were a little bit better then because because that was even influenced by like, they were making them like they were bringing more stories and stuff into the
Right,
textbooks. And so sometimes I'd pull them and we'd read a story from the textbook, but for the most
right.
part, yeah, no.
That's really, really fascinating. And for me, like, teacher training in the first 10 years of my career, professional development slowly started to get funded by the textbook companies. So
Oh,
at first
sorry.
our it's okay. At
I
first our
didn't know
professional
that. That's
development, I
terrible.
mean, at first our professional development was really just about, I mean, I'm using this term in vogue, but like whoever the celebrity educational thinkers were, like I'm
Yeah,
thinking Reggie Routman, I'm thinking
yeah.
of a level of
But
Lucy Hawkins,
they were innovative
but they
people
were
because
innovative.
that was
And
how it was for me too. Like Marilyn Burns was the math
Marilyn
teacher, and
Burns,
she was
yes,
amazing, and I saw
right.
her several times. Like,
But that was the thing. It was those were the people that were helping us new teachers turn theory and put it into practice,
absolutely,
right? And
yes.
so our
And we were
professional
given
development,
money to learn from them. I went
right?
to a 6-week program at UC Berkeley with the National Writing Project to
Yeah.
learn how to do a writer's workshop in my classroom, and my school paid for that.
I know, I know. And so what's interesting is that we didn't have textbooks early on, but we did get books. I mean, like we got Reggie Routman's books, we got Lucy Hawkins' books. That was
Yeah,
more of a scripted a bit later on, but we did
yes,
writers workshop as well, and we had this wonderful writer speaker from our local area, Colorado, named Mark Overmeyer, and he was like the writing guru. Like you
yeah,
would schools were like, please come to our.
yes.
I remember him teaching an entire lesson on writing workshop using the book Al Moon by Jane Yolen.
Yeah.
And I've had that book in my classroom ever since because it was like such a formative experience. I was like, you could teach all of these skills in this one picture book, and
Yes.
it was beautiful, right?
Yes.
Um, and it was all about those were the people that are helping us teachers find high quality materials.
Yes.
But we, in a way, Patricia, I feel like we relied on them because there were so many options. I didn't know who Jane Yolen was at the time, that she was a beautiful author. I didn't know. I needed those people to be like, you need to use these picture books, or have you read this person? Have you done? But then, as we're moving through, the textbooks companies started being the ones that were like, well, everything you need is just in this book. Like
Yeah.
and it became a program. It became standardized,
Well,
programmatic.
yes. And I mean, the thing is that just gets to me is that teachers are professionals. Like, I got my degree, but then I went to school for a year and a half after my bachelor's degree. And that's not how everyone does it. But like, most of us are getting post bachelor degree training. Like, we're getting advanced education. We're professionals. I basically was writing my own curriculum. Like, I was designing the classroom, and I was trusted to do that because I was an educational professional and I was excited about being that way. And I was constantly educating myself. But what's happened is that professionalism has been stripped so much from teachers. They're not treated like professionals. I mean, we can figure out how we want to shift into that conversation.
Well,
But
I
you
know
want to
for
talk
sure.
about the independence that the kids have is completely related to the independence that the teacher has.
Yeah. Well, for sure. And I mean, I don't feel that I was ever prepared to be a curriculum writer myself. Like, I just was trying to use what I thought was working and trying things out. But you're right. My teacher agency started being eroded away. And alongside that is, student agency. So, I mean, we can jump right into that. Let's just talk about like the school day. Like, what was your school, like the structure of your day like when you were teaching? Did you have blocks of time for reading and writing? Because for some context, everybody, we're both elementary school teachers. So
Yeah.
we're not talking about middle school, high school, with periods and having 200 and some students. We're really just in the K-5 realm. I've always taught fourth and fifth grade. You said third grade.
Mostly third grade. Yeah.
Yeah. So what was your day like, structured in terms of your day? Like, did you feel like you could teach whatever you wanted whenever, or?
Absolutely. Like, I totally structured my day. Like, for instance, what we did then through third grade is in the first hour and 15 minutes of the day, half the class was there. And then
Okay.
in the last hour and 15 minutes, the other half of the class was there. Most people would use that time, like in first and second grade, for teaching reading. But by the time the kids got to third grade, most of them, they were reading pretty well. And we had support staff that was helping students that were struggling with reading to give them extra support. So I used that time to teach math because I thought, well, it makes more sense. This is the area where I really need to see, what is each student understanding? What are they missing? What do they not get? And I could do that better with half the class with math. So that was my random choice. Like, I could decide to do that. I mean, I could
You didn't
flip
have
the
to
whole
be
schedule around.
so you didn't have to be lockstep with your teammates. You didn't have to all
No.
be teaching math at the same time.
No. No, I mean,
Okay.
not even like we didn't nothing.
Okay.
No, there was
Wow.
no one was telling me any time. The only thing we had a state framework for each subject. And it's like,
Okay.
basically third graders should be covering this in third grade. But I tended to go deep and not go wide. I
Right.
tended to focus more. And so, like, I was following the frameworks, but I certainly wasn't covering everything in them. No one was making sure I was doing that. I mean, my principal was coming in and people
Yes,
were
of
watching
course.
what I was
Yeah.
doing, but no one was like, oh, but you're not covering that part of the framework. Like, nobody, I was being treated like a professional, like,
Yeah.
you know.
What about instructional minutes? Did you have so many minutes you had to dedicate to each subject? So, like, if
No.
you went deep into a math concept and it took too much time? Oh
No.
my gosh.
And
Okay.
so
And
I also could combine writing and science. Like, I could have like a long lesson where we're doing, where I'm combining things, which I did a lot. Like, that was a big thing at that time was like, how do you combine math and writing? How do you combine? And so there was a ton of crossover. So I could take a huge chunk of the day and go really deep on something that would cover a bunch of subjects. Total
That
freedom to do that.
that's crazy. I mean, you keep using the word professionalism, and I'm just like in awe because it makes me just view what my current situation is. I can only use the word unprofessionalism. It's just not, like
Deprofessionalism.
deep
It's not
professionalism
that you're having your professionalism stripped from you. I
stripped
mean,
from you.
it infuriates me. I will say I've made some videos on TikTok, and it's been so interesting. Some of them related to education, and it breaks my heart because I've had some where thousands of teachers come on there and speak out.
Yeah.
And there will be some that will say, "Oh no, I'm allowed to do this in my school," but those are few and far between. Like so many more are just like talking about how they don't feel like professionals, they don't get to choose, and it makes me
It's
so
just
angry.
it's so fascinating. When I had my own classroom, I walked into a system that was already set up. So we had instructional minutes. You had to teach math. We all had to teach math at the same time. So we had a master schedule, and it was like the craziest job to try and make this master schedule so that everyone is teaching thing like every grade level is teaching the same subject at the same time. So math first thing in the morning for however many minutes, but it had to align because when I first started, kids were being pulled out of the classroom quite a bit for special services. So
Yeah.
whether it was for special ed or ILC or gifted and talented, there had to be a way to coordinate so that those people they weren't missing it like what's called tier one instruction time. Like everybody's getting the same lesson at the same time. And that was just like that was what I walked into. So I didn't get a choice. We were teaching math first thing in the morning, or we were teaching math depending on the school.
That tells you like
Sometimes
about 12 years how much things had already
I
changed.
know that is really crazy to me. And like I said, math is probably the most structured already. So if I went over time in a certain subject area, I could kind of make up for it if it was in literacy. I could kind of blend reading and writing together. But this is just kind of a random thing. One of the first schools I worked at, we had a year-round calendar system, which means students were going to school year round, but we cycled on and off all of our teachers. So we would have like 6 weeks on, 3 weeks off, 6 weeks
Yeah.
on, 3 weeks off.
Yeah.
And because of that, it well, the idea was that there's never supposed to be any summertime learning loss. That was I think, the original hope. But then we had to be lockstep with each other on our units because I've only got my kids for 3 weeks before they rotate to another teacher because if I go over, we've only got 6 weeks and then we're off track again. So our grade level team started like departmentalizing a little bit. Like I would teach, like we would all teach reading, we would all teach writing, but like science and social studies, um, like I would teach, I don't know, water, for example. If I went over my water unit, even by like a day, I was taking away from their next science unit. And it was a crazy experiment because in a way it sounded great. Like, oh, we're going to get these kids ready for middle school and changing periods. And to some extent, I do think that's kind of cool. Like kids love getting to interact with other teachers, but it really limited, like we had to be like, there was no time to make a mistake. If a lesson didn't land, I couldn't go back. If kids were getting really into it, that was the hardest part. If kids were really into it, especially with the experiments and they were talking, I had to like cut them off because I was like, guys, we don't have time. We got to move on and fill out this worksheet or write in our writers or our science notebooks. So just to hear the fluidity of your day is just fascinating to me because I've never had that kind of fluidity,
I mean,
even
I
early
could
on.
be like, "Oh my gosh, they're really squirrely right now. Let's go do PE." Like, so let's just go outside and do PE for a little while. Like, I could do that.
That's crazy. That's crazy.
You know?
It it looks like a few people are commenting and saying
Yeah, I
they've
know.
got some interesting, connections where every elementary school in a country county-wide district, man, I'm amazed. Like James is talking about how big his school district is. It's amazing to think of everyone in such a large school district being such lockstep with people.
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
this is really interesting.
Wow.
And but then that's the other thing. Like if things got in the way, like I mean, we know how that works. Like fire drills, and so and so gets hurt, and there's other things. Like like, and so I think that's been the air I breathed for so long. And it wasn't until you had mentioned mixing subjects, I didn't learn the word interdisciplinary or
Yeah.
transdisciplinary
Yeah.
until I was getting my doctoral degree,
Yeah.
like much, much later in my career. And
Yeah.
the thought that or the, to think that that was like a philosophical choice, not just what we had to do, but like I could philosophically make an argument that it might be better for kids to be interdisciplinary.
Yeah.
That blew my mind when I was getting,
Yeah.
in
Well,
grad
if
school.
you try homeschooling kids and having it be your own kids, your mind gets incredibly blown because they learn so much more if they are pursuing one thing they're interested in. Everything else comes in and
Yeah.
is related to it. Like that's how I like the whole idea of subjects and all of this got completely cracked open when I started homeschooling. And what's frustrating to me is that the techniques that not the techniques, but the way of life that we ended up cultivating because it was what was working for my kids, you can use that in a classroom, but like the classrooms would have to look completely different.
Right.
I was thinking when you were talking about being in lockstep, there's this story that I was telling you that I always feel like I have to share with people. I was in I volunteer at a writing program, this really cool writing program here in Oakland, and we were doing this epic poetry day at a local elementary school. So we went in and the whole day we were writing this epic poem with all of the students and we brought it together and it was really fun. And I was working in a second grade classroom and the teacher came up to me later and she said, "Oh my gosh, it's so cool to see my students writing poetry." And I said, "Well, don't they get to write poetry?" And she said, "Oh, no, poetry isn't in the curriculum." And I couldn't believe it on so many levels. Like that as a teacher, she couldn't decide that a 7-year-old can't write poetry. Like that's like they're like the age where poetry, like they think like poets, they talk like poets. Like the fact that they wouldn't be able to have poetry because it's not in the curriculum, that she couldn't choose for them to have poetry if she wanted to. And then I was thinking when I taught third grade, like we were using poetry all the time, like writing haikus, writing funny poems, because poetry is such a great forum for writing. It's a contained small thing. And so it's easy for students. Anyway, that was when I really got a sense of, oh my gosh, the classroom has really changed more than I ever imagined.
That makes me, well, first of all, I can very much relate to that teacher. But it makes me think of this idea. She says it wasn't in the curriculum. So I'm curious, there's two words that we've been kind of using and throwing out there, standards and curriculum. So
Yeah.
when you were in the classroom, you said you had guidelines that were state
A
guidelines. Were those
framework.
a framework, right? But
That was it.
there weren't like benchmarks or standards that you had to hit in a school year. They were just were they like recommended? We think that third
I mean,
graders
they
should know
wanted
this.
us to be covering what was in there.
All
If
right.
it was in the framework, this is what we should be teaching.
Okay.
But like there wasn't a test to see if we were doing
To see
that,
if you
and
were
people
right.
weren't coming in there and like checking every little box off. It was
Were
much
you
more in
yeah, so
general.
were you able to collaborate more with the teachers below you in second grade and above you in fourth grade vertically, in terms of like making sure as kids were coming in, what they knew versus their second grade framework versus third grade framework versus fourth grade framework?
I mean, we did do that a little bit, not so much. I mean, honestly, I had some teachers on the other sides of me that were doing things in a really conservative way.
Right.
I would find mentors at other schools that were
Yeah.
doing things in really cool ways. So, um, with the, as far as like their math skills and their reading skills and their writing skills, we were keeping track of that and like looking at like how well they were doing. But it just wasn't. No, it wasn't
Yeah.
there wasn't a system for doing that,
Right.
I
And
wouldn't say.
so what I think is interesting is that as soon as Common Core came out around 2010-ish,
Mhm.
it was all about standards and having common standards.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting, the lingo that got thrown out, at least for me, was or thrown around was standards based, or it was like so a standards based curriculum or standards based grading. So, those are big things. But like when she says it wasn't part of the curriculum, what's interesting is that I'm curious if poetry was a standard for third grade, but just the curriculum that she was using didn't allow her to teach
Well, I did
poetry.
ask her about that. They had a state mandated, or I mean, I don't know, I assume it was a state mandated textbook. They had a textbook they had to be following, and this was in Oakland. Every day they were expected to be teaching a certain lesson. So whatever textbook she was using that was like had scripted lessons day by day did not include poetry.
Yeah. And it's interesting because when Common Core first came out, I think we're seeing the effects of what Common Core did and didn't promise to do and didn't deliver. But I remember them feeling some excitement because it was like,
Yeah.
well, it doesn't matter what you use as long as you hit this standard, right? It
And
doesn't
they were
matter
all
what,
about it's going to be higher level thinking.
right?
Like
It's going to be higher
that was
level
kind of how they
thinking.
sold it.
And I was like, okay, well, that's actually kind of cool because you're standardizing the standards, but not necessarily the curriculum that we have to use. But man, that didn't last very long. I mean, it very quickly, textbook companies were selling standards based
Yeah.
fifth grade curriculum or textbooks. And it just became easier, I think, to manage from a higher level, like admin, just to buy a curriculum for their school district than to try and figure out who's teaching what to be able to hit each standard. And then with our testing, I mean, we always had standardized testing. What we didn't have early on was formative standardized testing. We only had the one test at the end of the year, probably for the first 5 or 10 years of my teaching career. But after that, we started doing formative standardized tests throughout the year, like 2 or 3 times a year, to make sure the kids were on track for when they did take the final test. And now it's just out of control. There's so many hours dedicated to testing and test prep that it just is horrible. But it's just it's really
And
fascinating to hear.
to remember that the textbook companies and the testing companies are one and the same. So they are. I wish I had gathered my facts on how much money, like the billions and billions of dollars that have gone to the textbook testing companies since all of this started. Like they have gotten so influential, so rich, and it's like that has nothing to do with the kids and what they need, and it's not matching what the actual students now need for the futures that they're going to have. But
So
that's
what are
a whole
you so
separate
what are
thing.
you noticing? I mean, since this is your area of expertise, like I'm sure that you've noticed, I mean, we could probably infer your students in your classroom probably had a lot more independent free time, probably more recess time
Yeah.
than what we have now. What are you noticing as like the effects of kids losing that autonomy? Because I know that my school day is very much structured and regimented. We do get recess, but they just recently cut. We used to have two recesses, and just in the last couple years, they cut it down to
So
one.
I would like to know, because
Yeah.
I think this just recess itself is really interesting. How much recess and lunch break do your students have to
Okay.
compare?
So currently, so I teach fifth grade. Currently, we get the kids to lunch. Let's see, I got to do some math here at 45, and they come back at 30, back to the classroom, and that includes lunch and recess. So if they eat quickly, if they eat fast, just scarf it down or whatever, then they could probably get upwards of 35 minutes
That's
of
much
recess
more
time.
than is the norm to tell to it. So
That's
anyway,
good.
yeah,
So
yeah, yeah, yeah.
what's considered the norm? I mean, do you know, like,
Yeah, so
nationwide
a
what
really great Substack to follow if your readers don't know the work of Peter Gray, Gary.
let me
His
write that
Substack is
down.
called
Peter Gray.
oh gosh, Play Makes Us Human. He's a research psychologist and his area of expertise is play and
Okay.
also just childhood independence and all of this. And his Substack is fascinating and it's
Okay.
based on research. His most recent one is talking about the importance of recess, and it's tied to another one he wrote earlier that talks about how much kids actually get. And the lunches in some schools, a lot of schools, the kids get 15 to 20 minutes for lunch. That's it, like to eat and to play.
Well,
Like it's incredible how much they've reduced it.
well, we recently, and I can only speak to our school district, we switched lunch and recess. It used to be kids would go out to play first and then come in and eat. And then I can't remember, I don't know if it was something around pandemic or something, or they were trying to reduce food waste, but they wanted the kids to eat first. I think that's what was happening. I think kids were maybe not, they were not eating to hurry up and go out and play.
Yeah,
And so there was some thinking about maybe having them go out and play first so they would build up an appetite and then come in and like eat and calm
got it.
down. And who knows, we may be going back to that. But what's interesting is that when lunch is first, the recess, like it's like an open-ended time for recess. They can go out as quickly as they can eat.
Yeah.
But if it's the other way around, they've got to have a set amount of recess time, which maybe
Oh,
will be 30 minutes because
yeah,
the cafeteria staff need time to clean up and get them back to class because they can't be late to class. They could be late to their own recess, right?
yeah,
But they can't be late to class coming back
yeah.
to class. So I'd be curious how the recess minutes may or may not change depending on
I mean, there's
the.
people in the comments. When I was a
Yep.
teacher, my students had 2 10-minute recesses in the morning. They had a 45-minute lunch, and then they had, I mean, for
45 minutes?
45 minutes for lunch, and it was like you said,
Oh,
lunch
okay.
and recess.
Oh,
So,
okay.
like, if they ate however long it took them to eat, the rest of the time they were going out to play. So it was 45 minutes, and they controlled how they were spending that time. They couldn't go out to recess first. They had to go to the cafeteria and eat something. But other than that, it was pretty open-ended. And then there was
Was
another
your
10-minute recess in the afternoon.
so you had 2 recesses.
3
Was your
recesses, 3
oh,
10-minute recesses,
3, I see. Wow.
and a
Was
45
recess time structured at all, or was it just open play?
open play.
Open play. Okay. Okay.
And
Well,
the teachers had to do yard duty, so I would be out there, that was part of what I had to do was, I don't know if teachers still do that, but I had to
well,
still be out
yeah.
there sometimes.
So I don't want to be all doom and gloom, but our recesses tend to be more structured than free play. I mean, a lot of, and maybe you can speak to this. What I'm noticing is that a lot of kids are just not playing, they're just loitering. And I'm wondering if
They
it's
don't know
related,
how to
they
play
don't know how
because
to
they
play,
haven't
right?
been given enough time to play.
So this is what I think this is an effect of years and years of being told how to do everything.
This is exactly the problem. So a big part of why I started shifting the focus of my book was when the Surgeon General came out with this in 2021 saying there's this youth mental health crisis that
Right.
of and I agree, but most of the stories look at phones and social media and put all the blame there. And I think that, yes, those are problematic, but what we're not paying enough attention to is how much independence kids have lost. And it is affecting. Peter Gray is awesome to follow to get
Yes.
more about this,
Yeah.
because he's one person talking about it. There's a really cool organization called Let Grow, and he's part of that. And one thing that they're trying to do is have schools adopt a program where in the morning or the afternoon or whenever they're going to do it, students can come and be at the school for free play, but the parents have to sign off to the fact that there's going to be an adult there in case of an emergency, but they are not there to be micromanaging this kids. Like they're there if someone hurts themselves, but if they're having conflicts, the kids have to figure it out because that is what play is meant for. Play is meant for kids to learn the social skills they need and to work out issues between each other. And kids do not have that the way they did. And so they've lost it they don't have free play in their lives to have that. When you're saying they're even their recesses are structured, they're not getting, like when I was a teacher, the kids were all like, they would come back and I'd be like, okay, calm down guys, because they would be so fired up because they were just out there doing their own things and they were like,
And
they were going
inventing
at it in
games,
10 minutes,
right?
They were
Right.
playing games and doing all this stuff. And then oh gosh, I get talking so fast, I lose my train of thought. But
Okay. I'm the same way.
they anyway, I lost it.
Well,
But
you were just saying, I mean, you were just saying the kids could just go out and play. And in my head, I'm thinking and creating their own games, inventing games. I think part of
absolutely,
the reason why we're structuring recess is because the kids aren't doing it on their own. So we're saying, you guys go play soccer. You kids go play, you know, football. You all go play, over here
Yeah.
on the playground, and structuring games, because if not, they'll just wander
And
around.
it's heartbreaking that kids have to be taught how to be kids because what is that telling us? It's telling us that we have taken away something essential because children, it's like you look at mammals, animals, baby animals, they know how to play. And there's a reason they play. They play because it's how they're meant to learn the skills that they're going to need when they're adult animals. Well, children are the same. And
Yes.
we shouldn't have to teach them how to play. We have just gotten in their way so they haven't been able to learn what is, their right and their biological right. Anyway,
Yeah, no, it's true.
don't
And you
get me
got people.
going.
Well, and people in the comments, James is saying the same thing. They learned not to play. He says a 3-year-old knows how to play. If an 8-year-old can't play, it's because they learned not to. And
Yeah.
I love all these resources that people are putting in here. I think I'm taking notes. Another great thing that to go along with the Peter Gray stuff. There's this organization called Global Day of Play that we've been doing in our school district. It took a lot of grassroots to get it going, but it's just one day, and this is because a problem that we're having is with tech. It's a no tech day.
Yeah.
And we bring in board games and card games and toys, really just toys, and say the kids are just to play. And we're actually told not to interact with them
Yeah.
because
That's right.
we have to try. And you had just posted a video about this, about letting kids like do it on their own without parental or teacher involvement. It's really fascinating how we've done this for a couple of years now. The first third of the morning is really hard. They're like arguing, or they're figuring, and they're coming to me to try and help them. I'm like, just try and figure it out, And it takes a while, but they
Yeah.
finally get into it. But man,
Yeah.
it's so interesting to see that we now have to like structure a day for them
Yeah.
instead of just having it be into the school day. The way that you describe your classroom and your learning, it reminds me very much of you, your homeschooling environment, being able to just pick and choose when you do things, and the
Yep.
time is fluid. But also the Montessori schools that,
Yeah.
that you and I had talked about, and I think
Yeah.
someone mentioned in here. Um, it just, I think it would be really hard for a teacher teaching in 2025 to now homeschool their kids if all they've been taught is like this.
Well, it
I think,
worries me about teachers. Like, if they don't, that's why I want to be talking about how education used
yeah,
to be, because if they don't know how it used to be, they have no sense of what they might want to fight for. Like,
right.
you should fight for this because this used to be the norm. And teachers should be able to teach this way. At the end of my day, I had 15 minutes that I called choice time. Like,
Yeah,
now thinking of that, it's like, oh, I just randomly took 15 minutes out of the instructional time of the day. And the students would earn that time collectively as a group. Like, they had it. If they were having problems during the day and like it's like people were not being quiet or whatever,
right.
like they could lose that time. But the choice time was literally, we had games. They could read a book by themselves. They could play games together. They could choose. And I had all kinds of fun stuff, and they could decide what they wanted to do. But it was 15 minutes of the day that they could choose to do what they wanted to do because they had basically earned it by being engaged with their learning before that. Like, I can't imagine, it doesn't sound like nowadays a teacher would ever be allowed to just yank 15 minutes from the school day to
Well,
do
and
something like that.
And this is going to go, I think, to our kind of our final wrap up question about what teachers can do to push back. But what I'm noticing is that even when I do push back and give my kids 15 minutes, it's never just 15 minutes, because they're so used to being
That's right.
teacher transitioned, that
Yes.
it's never just 15 minutes. And so it's actually really hard for me to justify in my head minutes wise, like, I'm going to give them 15 minutes of free time, but it's going to take me 30 minutes to get them off of their whatever it is. Usually it's tech, because they just have a hard time transitioning back.
Yeah.
So what do teachers do? We had talked about maybe wanting to chat about this. Like, how do we push back? Like,
I mean, I would love to hear because I think this is really important. You have pushed back. Like, you don't like, so I would love to know, like, what are the things that you have done as a teacher be, to give your students what you think they need, even though it may not be what your district is wanting you to do.
Yeah, well, I mean, I have to acknowledge I have a fair amount of privilege in terms of my abilities to push back. Like, I'm a white male, I have advanced degrees, and I have over 20 years of experience in the classroom. I wasn't really pushing back as a newer, younger teacher.
Yes.
Um, I just didn't have the agency or the privilege to be able to do so. If there was a veteran teacher on our team, we were doing what she was doing.
Yeah.
Um, and so I do want to acknowledge that I have a fair amount of privilege now that allows me to be able to see the system. I've both worked in the classroom, out of the classroom. I've coached teachers, I've coached principals. I understand the system of public education way better now than I did when I first started.
Sure.
And so for me, it's all about strategically pushing back, like finding ways of being able to, and I hate to use the word subversive, but subversively give my kids what I feel like is best for them.
Yeah.
Now, it doesn't mean that I shy away from conversations, but I know I know how overloaded and overwhelmed public education is as a system, and I take advantage of the fact that they're not going to come and try and put out every little thing. They're not going to come and micromanage every little thing because they've got so, especially in 2025 now, Patricia, with oh my gosh, all the things that are happening in politics and education. There are much bigger fish to fry
Yeah.
than whether or not I'm giving my kids extra free time at the end of the day.
Sure.
So I'm using those things as an advantage, right?
Mhm.
I'm using the distractions of the, federal funding and budget stuff and politics and all those things, and I'm being able to do things a little bit differently. However, I also want to acknowledge that I don't just throw everything out and say, I'm just going to be on an island and do my own thing because one, that's very lonely. And two, you don't get much support that way.
Mhm.
You just don't.
Mhm.
Teaching is a team sport. We need to be in it together. So whenever possible, my pushback, Patricia, is constantly, I feel like I'm proselytizing as much as I can. Like I'm sharing with my teammates this resource about student-led, teacher-led. I'm sharing articles that are talking about how bad our curriculum is at staff meetings, right? I'm like talking about, I'm not just saying don't do this. I'm saying
Yeah.
let's try this.
Yes.
And for the teachers that need the curriculum, they they can have that, but I also
Yes.
want them to see that there's other things that they can do.
Yeah.
And that's for what it's worth, that's what I'm doing. And
Yeah.
sometimes I get accused of closing my door and just kind of doing my own thing,
Yeah.
or paying lip service to, admin and saying, well, I am doing this, but really I'm not. But
Yeah.
if I'm being completely honest, I am trying to do it all. I'm just being very strategic about where I push back. Like we've got a standardized reading curriculum and there are no novels. And that's like a hill I want to die on, Patricia, is that my kids need to read novels.
Yeah.
And so I'm not hiding that. I'm just saying, look, I will do the standardized curriculum as much as I can, but I will favor whole novels over these AI generated passages
Oh,
every single day,
yeah.
right? So I think that what teachers can do is really, first of all, really examine like what are your values? Like what do you believe to like that you love, that you believe to be true for the good of your students?
Yes.
And become well versed in that so
Yes.
that when someone does question you and say, well, what you're not doing it this way, you can feel comfortable saying, well, actually, this is what I know to be true about how children learn, right?
Yes.
Um, and then, it's a battle every day, Patricia. Like I can't, some days I get tired and I'm like, you know what? I just don't want to fight you guys. Let's just do this,
Sure. I mean,
or
teaching is exhausting.
teaching is exhausting, or sometimes we have mile markers or benchmarks that we have to hit. And so in order to do that, I have to bring samples to these things and I have to do the samples from the curriculum. So it's like, well, all right, we got this writing prompt that we got to bring to a meeting. I need you guys to write this for me. But I'm
Sure.
always very open with my students. I mean, I have older students, I have fifth graders. So I tend to just be very real with them and just say, look, I know you don't like this curriculum,
Y
but this is what I have to
Yes.
bring to my next meeting.
Yes.
So let's write this writing
That's
prompt.
right. And
And
they're
then
and because they trust you as a teacher, they're gonna be more likely to do things that maybe they think, "Ugh, I don't wanna do this," but it's like, it's gonna help my teacher who I trust, and like
Yeah.
we're going to do a lot of other stuff that is meaningful, so it's fine. I want to just comment on the fact that the work you're doing as a mentor teacher is, I think, this is where shifts can start to happen. Like, we need the teachers that have the experience and have the perspective like you to speak up and to help especially we're going to we have teachers coming up who have been gone to school since No Child Left Behind and all
Right.
of these things we're talking about. So they may have no sense of what a classroom, how it could look different.
Yeah.
So they need these mentor teachers who have the experience to help them know what the other possibilities are. And I think that's the change. The professionalism of teachers got stripped from above, and the way to regain it is to build it back up from the bottom, from the people
100%.
who are doing the work, who are connected with the kids, who understand what the kids need, and are doing it because they care about those children and understand that education is not meeting their needs. And so we're going to fix this.
I'm so glad you said that because I didn't even think about that. But you had so much agency as a teacher in the 90s before No Child Left Behind because you were given permission to be a professional. In some ways, that's what I'm doing. I'm giving my colleagues or younger teachers permission to
Yes.
disagree
Yeah.
and say, you know what, actually, this isn't necessarily what's best. And you know what the funny thing is, Patricia, is that they know.
Yeah.
Deep down in their gut, they
Of
know that
course.
it's not good for kids,
Yeah.
but they don't know any better, and they need someone to give them permission.
Yeah. And
And
they're
so,
afraid. They don't want to mess up. So, like, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
oh man. So when you I know we have to wrap up because we've been talking. I mean, you and I could talk for probably like another 2 hours,
Yes,
but
we could.
like, I am curious. Do you feel like it was easier to push back, or were there things to push back on
I
when
didn't
you were
really
a teacher?
feel a
Did
lot
you
of
ever
need
feel
to
like you
push
need to?
back.
That's so
There
fascinating
there was
because I feel
I
like,
remember there being talk when I was a teacher about, the business people were starting to come. Like,
yes,
we wanna get the business people on the school board because we need to start running these schools more like businesses. And so there was already a movement toward that, but it hadn't happened. And that's when No Child Left Behind, that's when it really that model came in. But I didn't feel a need to push back. No. Mm-mm.
well, so then let's just end this with some takeaways. Like, what can people take away from this? I mean, like, what's gained versus what's lost? I mean, I know obviously a lot is lost with all the standardization and lack of student agency. For me, my big takeaway talking to you is I feel like I need to help teachers advocate more for themselves and their students. Do you feel like that's a a thing that teachers need to do?
I mean, if they feel called to it, I feel like teachers have so much on their plates that I
So
do
right.
not blame them if they don't have the energy to do that. But if they feel called to it, go for it. Like, do it. And if they don't have the energy, do it just do it in small ways.
Yeah.
Just the small ways. But things change. Like, there's I volunteer at a high school here in Oakland that is a internship based high school. It started out as a charter school. Now it's just a straight up Oakland public high school. It's internship based. Those students go to internships 2 days out of the week. The other days, I would say they're academics. A lot of times they're taking community college classes for their academics,
Yeah.
but they do all of this project-based learning. They have to come up with projects that will meet community needs, and they have to run their projects by a panel of students and teachers to make sure that they all agree that the project that they're doing will actually meet people's needs and
I love
how to tweak and refine it. So anyway, what I'm saying is that there are places in the system where people have pushed back and have made change. And I think we just need to keep going with that. The textbook companies are losing. I have read that they don't quite have the power that they did before as
me either.
lobbyists because it's broken up and it's become much more localized. So that's a little opening to be like, okay, well, they don't have quite the power. So how do we from
Right.
the bottom usurp a little of that?
Oh, yeah, that's true. Patricia, thank you for chatting. I love this. I love
Me
hearing about,
too.
it's funny. I thought I was going to come in feeling all depressed about how good things used to be, but I'm left feeling a lot of hope, honestly, because I feel like the tide is turning, and I love the fact that you are using your platform to just keep sharing these stories about how like this wasn't like the dinosaur ages and we're never coming back to it. Like
That's right.
these are core tenets that we need to return to. So I really appreciate you doing this and chatting with me, and I
I
just love
and
it. Thank
I
you.
appreciate teachers so much. People that go into teaching almost always do it because they care about young people, and I just wanna say, keep that at the front of your mind and let that motivate you, your care for the students. I just so appreciate teachers, and I hate how our society treats teachers right now in a lot of ways. I want teaching to become I want people to see teachers as the professionals that they are. I would love it if they would get paid more. I would love it if education became more of a value in our
Yes,
country.
I agree.
So anyway, I just want to say all of the teachers watching, I am so grateful for you. Keep doing the good work and let's make change
Just
together.
keep on going on. Yep. Keep moving
Yeah.
forward. So
Yeah.
Patricia, thank you so much. It was a pleasure
Thank
chatting with you. All right.
you.
All
Bye
right. Take care.
everybody.